Welcome back. If you have just tuned in, you're watching Women's AM Series 2, back to give you news, debate and more. We're joined this morning by Sister Nazia Jalali, who is an author of children's books and most recently The House of Ibn Kathir, mashallah. So welcome to the show, Sister Nazia. Welcome back to the show, I should say. Obviously, original member of the Women's AM team. I'm keen to know, you know, this kind of writing, it's hardly a sort of part-time habit. So what made you kind of take on this huge task and got you into it in the first place?
Well, it was my daughter, actually, because when she started reading, particularly once she had actually mastered it and become an independent reader, I was conscious of the speed at which things were happening within the school, as well as being encouraged to read widely. She was also then learning things about, you know, historical figures in terms of British heritage, and it was all sorts of combinations of things happening. That what I felt was that as a Muslim parent, I really wanted to educate my child in terms of the deen. It was very important to me that she knew her identity, and we also have a vast heritage. We have a history. So I wanted her to know about this. And the thing was, at the time, there was lots of books available in terms of earlier readership and picture books, but in terms of the older books category, there was limited.
That's true, actually. There's a lot for younger children,
exactly.
But not much for
Not
older.
that I didn't, I still went and got those books, but my daughter had reached a certain level that I needed to push her to the next, beyond just being familiar with seeing the Muslim names, the etiquettes, the Assalamu alaikum, and just beyond that. So I thought, what if, you know, it'd be nice if there was a book that, and it was just that. That kind of led me to this thing that, you know, it would be nice to have a book that incorporated all of those things that I was looking for. So, you know, to be able to learn about the major scholars in Islamic history, to learn about what it means to be a Muslim, our identity, our values, how it affects us in our daily lives. Basically, to help a child understand and make that transition from those middle years to adulthood. And so for me, this book was about all of that. So it has the elements of what it means, friendship, leadership, you know, about learning about making mistakes. How do you then deal with...
It's interesting, actually, because I've read the book, mashallah, and I think it's, you know, what you've done very cleverly is wrapped up some, you know, accurate historical Islamic information, you know, in a story that's going to be very engaging as well. You know, it's the old saying goes, if you want something done, do it yourself. So well done for that, mashallah. Without further ado, let's go straight to her views, where today we're discussing Is Fair Beautiful? There have been many articles and discussions on TV and in magazines where light-skinned black women feel left out or different compared to their dark-skinned family and friends. They describe not feeling African enough. Then there is the opposite, where dark-skinned Asian and Indian women are made to be seen as inferior or less beautiful compared to their fair-skinned family members. We can see that Islam has clearly stated nobody should be made to feel inferior based on their outward appearance. So why do we still face these problems today? Sister Nazia, I'm going to come to you first. You know, this is such a kind of interesting topic, and I'm sure one that you've touched upon a lot in your Muslim lifestyle writing. So why do you think this idea of fair is beautiful has come from?
I think, firstly, look, in every civilization there's been this idea of beauty, but in terms of modern society, the standards and the ideals, they root back, they go back to colonialism and slavery period. If you look to India for the period where you had the British rule over India, it's quite interesting because what you saw was that when the colonization took place, there was a caste system there, and they used the caste system, and which is also linked to the skin colour tonings, and they used that as a way to entrench the British rule. So, for example, what happened was with the caste system, they used skin colouring as a basis for categorizing superiority between the classes. So you had a social strata where right at the top was the fair-skinned and at the bottom was the dark-skinned. With the fair skin, it opened up a lot of opportunities and privileges. So, for example, they had better prospects in terms of education, jobs, and things like that. And this wasn't the case with the ones with the darker skin tones.
It's hard for us to imagine a more offensive way of categorising people.
Exactly, but that's what happened. And then when you look to slavery, you see a similar kind of hierarchy forming within the society there as well. When you look at what happened to the black slave women when they were abused by their white slave masters. What happened was that they produced a generation of mixed race slaves, children that became slaves still.
Yeah.
And the result of that was that there was the black slaves would be working out in the fields, but these children, the mixed race children slaves, they would be moved on to to working in the houses.
Yeah.
So this created this kind of psyche that actually, you know what, the closer you are to looking white, actually that comes with privileges. You're seen as a higher status. I mean, some of these kids actually, they may have even achieved their freedom through that process.
Yeah.
The legacy of this thinking is that what we see today, where this whole idea of this Eurocentric beauty standard, where the closer you are to white or fair-skinned, that is seen as successful. So, for example, in India or amongst Asians, and this is broadly actually with all of them, the perception is, okay, just as an example, look at the matrimonial ads that you have with the Indian subcontinent. What the most prized bride would be the one who's fair-skinned, and they're very frank about it in the way that they say it. But that's how they perceive it. The fairer you are, that woman is now going to be more successful in terms of marriage prospects, job prospects, her earning capacity on all levels. Yeah. And that is now the aspired standard of beauty, the Eurocentric standard of beauty.
So we can see, you know, historically it's a kind of very ingrained, you know, idea. SubhanAllah, that's interesting. Sisters, we are live from our London studios and we want to hear from you. So please do call in with your comments and any questions that you may want to pose to the panel. The number is appearing on your screens now. So, Sister Yasmin, you know, it's very interesting to kind of historically map this idea of beauty and how it's kind of led us to where we are today. But what kind of pressure do you think that women and young girls feel as a result of this stigma?
Yeah, firstly, this perception of beauty has evolved over the years. So, for instance, what we saw was beautiful in the 50s has changed to the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s, and now we have a totally different standard of beauty. With regards to pressures facing young girls, we have magazines here in the UK and around the world that propagate this narrative that if you want to be beautiful, you have to have these, you know, as you said, these European features. And we see this in Africa, for instance, where the models here in the UK are usually Somali because they have this, you know, European feature. And these Italian photographers have, you know, approached models like Iman and Yasmin Wasame, and they actually said, you know, we want these features because they have, you know, slim nose, they have, you know, quite, you know, small features, full lips.
Big eyes.
Exactly. And so this European standard of beauty has, as you said before, been brought up by colonialism, and it's not, you know, an African thing where if you want to be beautiful, you have to have these European standards. It's, you know, the Europeans are imposing this on the Africans, and now it's becoming a norm. And what we see is it's not just within, you know, within continents or within countries, it's within the mind, and it's very difficult to change people's ideology and their mindset towards these issues because it's been long ingrained, and it just takes the new generation, the next generation, to sort of change these views.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's ideas are the kind of hardest thing to change, isn't it? You know, because as you say, they've been there for so long. The history, as Nazia described, is a very long history. So, you know, these aren't things, ideals, these aren't things that are going to change overnight, subhanAllah. But why is it, Nazia, do you think that women, you know, whatever colour, wherever they're from, why is it that you think that we're never fully happy with our skin colour?
Obviously there's a host of reasons, but the two that I want to look at is the standards are unrealistic. Yeah. That's a major factor, the fact that a woman cannot be accepted for what she is. Yeah. Yeah. The fact that the world cannot acknowledge that the world is full of women of different colours. This is not taken into consideration. The other factor is values have changed in society. Yeah. That's a big factor in terms of we've got, since globalisation, cosmetic industry, fashion industry, all of these have come together to define a standard, and they have virtually capitalized on the insecurities of women by defining an unrealistic standard of beauty. 200 years ago, it was unthinkable for a European woman to walk out under the sun without her parasol, because it would be a major faux pas for her to do that, because they associated fair skin with upper classes, privileges, wealthy people, whereas the darker skin tone people were associated with the poorer classes, labourers, and so on. So today, it's a totally different shift of values. I
was going to say the irony, you know, I remember, you know, sort of years ago when my sister and I were young, we were absolutely obsessed with tanning.
I know, and that's the standard now. people with white or fair skin, they are encouraged, the industry tells you, the fashion industry say to you, you should have that sun-kissed glow look.
Yes.
Yeah? That is the ideal image for you.
Yeah.
Paradoxically, dark-skinned women are told, you should have light skin.
Yeah.
And this is horrendous.
Yeah.
It's such a horrendous situation to be in, because now what happens is, what paths are open to you as a woman? Yeah. And there's a spectrum, because when you look at it and you have the products in the shops to tell you what is, what's happening, you are spending amount of money on cosmetics, tanning creams to either change the tones of your skin, or on the extreme end, women are putting their lives on risk, health and lives.
Absolutely, a lot of these products sometimes are damaging or
lead
even
to cancers.
Dangerous.
Exactly.
So, Sister Shahina, why do you think it is that we're never happy with what we've got?
I think I want to touch on what Sister Nazia said about capitalising on women's insecurities. Yeah. My question is, who created those insecurities in the first place?
Yeah.
When society is constantly telling you that you won't be happy until you achieve a certain standard if you don't look like this. You switch on the programs every morning, and there has to be a section that talks about you got to have this dress, you got to have this look, you got to have this colour, you got to have this new cream. This will make you look younger. This will make you look like this. If you have the thin eyebrows, you will look nice. Tomorrow, if you have the bushy eyebrows, that will look nice. That is constantly changing, and you're constantly, once you achieve something, then the fashion changes and you're told, okay, now you have to achieve this.
You can never
if you are constantly being told by media, if you're constantly being told by corporations who are trying to push these products that you won't be happy until you achieve this, you're going to be unhappy. You will never be happy. Doesn't matter how much plastic surgeries you do. And we've seen those documentaries where people have gone crazy.
They get obsessed with it, don't they? And
looking odd.
I
wouldn't say they look anything near beautiful after all these surgeries, but they won't be happy.
It's an issue of polar opposite. For instance, those who are light-skinned, the fair-skinned women would want to be dark-skinned. For instance, they would go tanning, and then you have the dark-skinned girls who want to be light-skinned.
And bleaching the faces, causing skin cancer. Both spectrums are really hurting themselves and trying to achieve this.
I think there's that old saying, isn't it? The grass is always greener on the other side. This is such an interesting topic, and the discussion so far has been very enlightening. But we do have to go for a quick break now. But before we do, here's a reminder of this week's competition.
This week on
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Women's AM. Before the break, we were in the full throw of this morning's discussion about skin colour and where do our ideas of beauty really come from. Please join the discussion. We would love to know what you think. The number to call will be on your screens throughout the segment, or you can send us a tweet at Islam Channel #Women'sAM. We are waiting to share your tweets, inshallah. So, Sister Nazi, we've had a really interesting discussion before the break about how we're kind of never satisfied with what we've got.
No, absolutely. And I think the key thing to remember here is that I think now, in today, it's every woman that's been targeted, regardless of what colour she is. And standards are set for everyone. And it's like such an uphill struggle for women now, which is why we see depression, self-esteem, because the reality is you're not going to fulfill those standards. You're not. Because you're going to die either doing it, or you're going to end up completely depressed in the whole process. But what it leaves you feeling is worthless. And with battered self-esteem. And for a lot of women, this is something that is an issue. And when you have images around you bombarding you how you should look, it is quite, it wears you down. It does wear you down.
I think it's interesting that you said it kind of affects everybody because, you know, in the Muslim community, obviously, you know, we know Islam came as a guidance and a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there are several ayah in the Quran describing the hura as fair and beautiful. So do you think that this kind of feeds into kind of the Muslim perceptions of beauty?
With Hur al-Ain, if we just look at some of the descriptions, in Surah Al-Waqi'ah it says, and with them will be their companions, pure, most beautiful of eyes. If Ibn Hajar described them as being that that the marrow of her calves can be seen from beneath her clothes, and that when a man looks at his face, in the liver of one of them, it's like a mirror because of the fineness of her skin and the purity of her colour. Now, these descriptions are very abstract. And what we have to understand is that when it comes to the descriptions of Jannah, we will never truly appreciate what it is that Jannah is about.
I mean, that's so true. It kind of, our understanding is limited.
It's limited because what we're told is that when he enters paradise, he will have all the delights and pleasures that no eye has seen, no ear has heard, and it's not even entered the minds of a man. What it could possibly be like, there's no way of knowing.
Yeah.
So I think people take those words like light and fair and use our own definitions.
No, exactly.
When Allah describes something, Allah knows what He is describing. Our mind cannot comprehend what Allah means when He describes something.
I mean, you know, the phrase "hur" actually is light or beauty. It doesn't mean white, and it's these misconceptions that are prominent in the Muslim communities because some of us are not Arabic. We don't speak Arabic, and so the words do change, and the concept of beauty is subjective. And so what I find beautiful in my continent would be different to how other people might perceive that beauty. And it's these, you know, semantics that are changed throughout history and because of how we adapt to society. And these words mean completely different things in different places. For instance, in Asia, if they want to interpret the Quran the way they want to, some people might say, well, "Hu" actually means white. It's how I perceive beauty to be. But the real definition is light/beauty. And as you said, you know, God's beauty is totally different. We can't really match up to, you know, the standards that, you know, Jannah is or what God's
we can't
beauty
compare
is.
it to anything that we know in this
the,
world.
The issue here is you can't draw parallels.
Yeah.
Because to say that you have something, you will not have anything in this world. You will never see anything equal to what is in Jannah.
Exactly.
So we can't even say what the colouring is. We can't, because we can't grasp it. And I think the problem is when people make parallels with Jannah, you're going down the wrong road, because especially with something like this, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not made a classification, then who are we to put a classification based upon what we learned about Jannah that we can really not comprehend?
Exactly, and it's these misinterpretations within these communities by just looking at the Quran and then taking a quote and misinterpreting it and giving it a whole different definition that you feel is fit for it when in fact it isn't.
The other thing that people lose sight of is the fact that the differences in our colours is a sign of His omnipotence.
Absolutely.
He is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Musawwir. He's the fashioner of all forms of creation. So the way we look, everything, these attributes were given to us.
Absolutely.
And this is something that we have to respect. And it's something that when you question it or challenge it or put standards, you're doing something that is actually very, very wrong and goes against, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has clearly said it's taqwa. That is what, if there's a beauty standard, it is taqwa. Because there are references in the Quran that some of the, in Al-Qiyamah, for example, some faces that day will beam with brightness and beauty. Another example was with the Prophet ﷺ when he described a woman. It wasn't based upon how she looked. What he said was the world and all the things that are in it that are precious, but the most precious thing is the virtuous woman. So these it points to the fact that you know, we are causing the problems. We are actually, by creating new definitions, the definitions we do not have the right to, the standards that we are setting that we do not have rights to,
I think it's interesting, you know, talking about how, you know, obviously the kind of different interpretations and the different understanding, even within our own community. So, Sister Shahina, how do we as Muslims tackle these issues?
First and foremost, be firm and in your understanding from the Islamic standpoint, that, you know, Islam teaches us where beauty lies, in our taqwa, in our mannerisms, in our character, in our love for Islam, in our love for Allah. Now, having said that, I know I'm saying the obvious. It doesn't mean that we don't put an effort into looking presentable, that we just don't walk around in rags and just not look decent and clean. But we follow the boundaries of Sharia in this. The other thing is, in terms of tackling this issue, you really have to be, I think I've realised the importance of it so much more after I had my daughter. My husband is fairer in skin than I am, and my daughter's got my shade, even slightly darker. When she was born, she was much more darker than they expected. And it's horrible to say this, and obviously you worry. You worry what kind of insecurity she will grow up in. To me, my daughter is beautiful, mashallah. But you are, you know, I'm from Bengali background, and people, you know, the racism within Bengali culture when it comes to colours and stuff, the same as Asian or African, most culture. And one of the things in terms of tackling this, I was firm from the beginning because I wasn't going to have my daughter grow up with insecurities. I did not want colour to be a discussion in my home. And alhamdulillah, my husband and I talked about it, and we said, you will speak to your family and I will speak to mine. I don't even want jokes about it. I don't want relatives coming in and having a discussion about this. They can call me insensitive. They can call me not light-hearted. They can call me whatever they want. I'm not going to have this discussion in my house. I know the effect that has. I know people, you know, when they've looked into marriages and the guy was okay with her, but the family weren't because her colour was a certain colour. And the impact that has on a person emotionally, it's not nice. And to grow up with thinking that you are not good enough because your colour is a certain shade, I am not having that in my house.
Absolutely, I think with children as well, you don't know what little thing it's going to be that's going to plant that seed of insecurity.
No, I remember growing up, when you finally realise your skin colour, you don't even think about your skin colour as children growing up. You're very innocent, isn't it? Until people point it out.
It reminds me of that ayah, you know, when a child is born upon a pure fitra, and it's what the parents or the things around which set ideals and really gross erroneous, you know, like this example that you just said, you know, as parents, we have a huge responsibility. Then we're told we're supposed to treat our children equally. And there are situations where you have families where children are different colours. And I have seen the horrendous way that people will come in, oh, she doesn't look like you, or she doesn't look like you. And you know what they are saying.
Who does she
or they
look like?
they compare, oh, why isn't she the same colour as he is? Or this kind of thing. And what they forget is the children are listening. Your next generation is listening. They're listening to when the conversation you are having, oh, who's suitable as a bride for your uncle and who isn't. You setting the standards, you are propagating.
This is what ingrains within, you know, when you say, how do you define beauty? It's these conversations around us. It's this kind of upbringing that ingrains within us what we define as beauty.
We've had some interesting tweets come in from some of our viewers about how we define beauty. Got the first one at Fazila Patel, says that beauty is from within. Another one at Noor Jahan describes beauty as simply modesty. One word, I think that's beautiful, alhamdulillah. And then we've got at Nazir, beauty is the artistry made by God, alhamdulillah. So we're seeing kind of different ideas coming in there. So
but in tackling this, we have to be firm. Regardless, because I am firm and I was firm right from the beginning, mashallah, I don't have a problem. I don't have this issue. People know not to have this discussion around my kids or around myself.
And Allah says, you know, the children are on trust to their parents. And so we have I'm not a mother, but parents have a responsibility to teach their children that, as you said, it's absolutely unacceptable to pick someone on based on their, you know, skin colour.
Well, I think parents, they have to, the responsibility, if you were looking into the homes, it begins with the home and then it goes out into society. When you are raising your daughters, you raise them so that they understand that it's not about what you look like on the outside. Well, it is about your taqwa. It is the verse that, you know, it is the description that I just gave earlier on about what the Prophet said. That is this is what the ideals are that you aspire to. And we have to raise our sons to understand that it's not what meets the eye, but it's more than that.
And also I think the reminder that, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made us from different soils. We were created to be different, and those differences should be celebrated.
This is a discussion that we also, not just within our home, we have to have with our relations with people around us.
We challenge it with society.
But you know, these ideals are so ingrained, you know, particularly into some societies, as we've kind of mentioned. So how realistic is it that we can challenge or even change them?
No, I think it can be done, because 1400 years ago, a man came and challenged the complete peninsula, the Arab peninsula. When you think about what the Prophet ﷺ had to deal with, and the ideas that were floating around, the perceptions about women, the perceptions about races, the perceptions about there was every form of discrimination that actually exists today, that was there. It's still there. And he was able to challenge those and change that. And this is why I was emphasizing the fact that you begin with the home and you take it out to the wider society. You raise your sons and your daughters well. And then when you go out in society, you don't accept it. You don't accept those conversations. You don't engage in the things that, you know, like, for example, I know caste systems still prevalent. You know, especially they seem to really surface when you're looking for a spouse. They tend to ask you amongst the Pakistani community, for example, what caste you're from. And I'm thinking, you know what, I don't know. Why is that even, what criteria is that? But, you know, it's like, we are propagating these ideas. And they should never have been allowed to surface. And it's something that we need to go back to Quran and Sunnah. And this is the choice that you make. Ultimately, you are either facilitating the wrong ideas or you're actually actively working to stop these ideas. And it's your responsibility at the end of the day. And we have to challenge
agree. You know, I think being proactive rather than reactive, because essentially we're talking about kind of these things they're outside of our control. So how do you think we go about challenging these and changing this mindset?
You know, when Islam came to the Arab Peninsula, how tribalistic the people were, how nationalistic they were. That something was so deep ingrained. If something like that can be removed by Islam,
absolutely.
This this is nothing. We can do it as long as we fix it within our own minds and we take those steps and talk to our sons and daughters, that we talk to our family, that we talk to each other. And like, you know, the Muslim matrimonial slide that you said, I don't see why it's allowed to happen where, if you actually look, it's divided into such a way, you have to be wheatish or not, you look this shade or that shade or really fair. It's actually categorized and people take it. This should not be allowed to happen because you're accepting it.
It shouldn't even be a matter of acceptance. We should be, you know, accepting who we are.
That's the key
really.
word.
Exactly. And it's the way our Creator created us, and we should be blessed and thankful, because there are people out there who haven't even got a pigment because they've got a disorder. And so then to sort of categorize which, you know, shade you want to be, that's just absolutely ludicrous. And I think, you know, standards of beauty, again, they have shifted over the years, and maybe in 20 years' time, beautiful could be totally different. Maybe having a darker skin could be beautiful.
I think that's absolutely true. These ideas of beauty, they are fluid. We've seen them change, you know, throughout history, and as well, as we've mentioned, from culture to culture. So Jazakallah khair, sister, some really, really fantastic points raised in that discussion. For women all over the world, we can see that culture and history play a big part in telling women what is beautiful and what is not. Many of the things we see and hear on adverts or magazines are to sell products, hence an obsessive or negative image about oneself, most of which has been airbrushed or changed anyway. I will end by giving a hadith of the Prophet, peace be upon him, narrated by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. Allah does not look at your appearances or your wealth, but he looks at your actions. Beautiful, mashallah. Well, we've had a very interesting discussion indeed, but now it's time for our final break, but we will be back in a few minutes to discuss 5 ways to train your brain. So stay tuned to find out more. Assalamu alaikum.